The first 6 rounds of the Chess 24 Legends of Chess tournament are in the books, and Magnus Carlsen, as you might imagine, is in first place, 17 out of a possible 18 points. In all of his first 6 matches, he has won by demonstrating one different skill set that he possesses, and what other way to celebrate it than to turn it into the stones of the Infinity Gauntlet. I will feature one key moment from every match against every opponent, and hopefully you will learn something and enjoy the thumbnail art. In round 1, Magnus had the white pieces against the niche Giri, and in true Magnus style, surprised the niche with the ridiculous idea G4, computer-backed preparation, potentially removing the game from theory, and launching a belligerent attack through the course of the middle game on Anish's king and down the middle of the board. Magnus went on to chip away, despite sacrificing a few pawns at Anish's center, and after a little bit of a transformation of the middle game, was an exchange up, and then converted the game, but not without a Magnesian flair. And what I mean by that is, sometimes Magnus has surprising moments, like in this position, where he missed checkmate in 4, with rook h8, king takes, and then if the king runs, you have rook h1, followed by queen takes g7, and a checkmate on the king. But Magnus did it in Magnesian fashion, as I said, by playing queen h5, trading off the queens, and simply winning and converting an endgame and defeating Anish Giri to start things off and put the rivalry to rest by winning his match 3-1. In the second round, Magnus had the following position with the black pieces against Vishy, a rematch. They had 2 World Championship matches together. At this point, it was 1.5, 1.5. And here, Vishy went crazy. Rook h8 and queen g4, looking for queen c8 and queen a8 mate. But it's kind of funny because white is suffering from the same problem here, and apparently there was a beautiful move, queen e1, king a2, knight d3 with tempo. And now black cannot play queen c8, because if you do, you get mated, knight b4, and if here takes, and regardless of where the king moves, there is queen a1 coming with mate, or queen b4. Magnus missed it at the time of the game, still played a decent move, knight takes g6, but apparently here there was queen g1, and the game goes on. But Vishy was already all in at this point, and played the move rook e8, and, well, Magnus didn't need another invitation, right? So, in Magnesian flair, for some reason, we have a little bit of a dent but in our armor, but we find a way to get it done. Magnus somehow always is the last person in the game to make the best move. Or his opponents are the last people in the game to make mistakes. It's just sort of his playing style. Pressure, clock, just his whole presence, as you can see from this image below. And Magnus won his 4th game and his match against Vishy. In the 3rd round, Magnus, demonstrating in his match against vslecko that he is an endgame genius. In this position, he transforms the structure for black advantageously for himself. First, he takes on c6, makes the trade of pieces, and now this pawn is separated from this pawn and has a bit of a difficulty coming forward if you can control this square. Then Magnus correctly hides his bishop and uses this knight as a target, the c-file, and will play f3. And again, transforms the position advantageously for himself. One of his pawns dominates 3, as none of them can come forward, and I will just show you, scrolling through the moves, as he maneuvers his queen in, asserts dominance with the bishop and the queen, and watch this extremely instructive maneuver. a4, a5, a6. What that does is that leaves the a7 pawn there forever, and queen b7 is possible at any moment. In all endgames, this pawn will be a liability now, and that pawn actually, as we slowly scroll through the moves, Magnus brings all his pawns forward, trades off everything. This thing was the deciding factor. He now creates a little breakthrough, and once again, because of the dominance of the structure, vslecko was not able to put up any resistance, and that's it. Once again, b6 or king b7, and it is the a pawn that will promote. Brilliant positional transformation, creating pawn weaknesses for vslecko and winning his 3rd match in convincing fashion. However, in the 4th round, we saw, and I'm actually starting this completely from the beginning, we saw Magnus with the white pieces employ a weapon that Fabiano Caruana employed against him in their World Championship match. So Fabi played this knight d5 move, and now we see Magnus taking a weapon from his enemy and using it against Borah's Gelfand. And the players went out all the way into the theory that was played in that match. And here Gelfand, instead of continuing a6 like Magnus did, continued b6. And Magnus made it look easy by playing very simple chess. Advancing on the king side, utilizing this structure, g3, h4, always good against the knight on g6, and because Gelfand already committed this pawn here, now anytime he castles, his king will be getting to safety, but the h5 pawn will be lost. And so that's all Magnus did. And you might say, well, why did Gelfand castle? Well, the problem is if he doesn't castle, then he's going to get steamrolled down the center of the board, not to mention that this pawn is always just a target. So Magnus uses the opening that he uses flawlessly with the black pieces, and in playing against it, just makes it look like it doesn't even belong on the board. Magnus beautifully wins a couple pawns, sacrifices in exchange for total dominance again of his opponent's structure, and went on to win a super easy game against Boris Gelfand. But in round 5, Magnus put up with adversity. In the first game against Vasily Ivanchuk, he lost. He actually played way too adventurously, and he lost. And he actually hung checkmate. So that's a game in and of itself. This was game number 3, Magnus down 1.5 half at this point, sacrificing a pawn, down a pawn here, but with pressure, the usual spatial dominance. And here, Vasily Ivanchuk went for a simplification of the position, and Magnus played this critical move h6. Here, apparently, Vasily had to take, and basically hang on for dear life. The point is that if white plays queen takes h6, there is queen h5, and you simplify, and while white does have very active rook, black has some drawing chances. But Vasily made one mistake, and Magnus played the very nice continuation, rook g7, and the very calm queen trade, as we saw in the vslecko game. Smooth, queen g4, and if you trade the queens, your king is dominated, and your structure, it's all about the pawn structure with Magnus, very weak, rook here, and black just is helpless against the defense of his position. A few more moves were played, and Magnus, in beautiful style, rook a7, finished it off, Vasily resigned, and Magnus went on to win this game in the Armageddon. Why did I include this? Well, no villain ever was successful, or no hero was ever successful in obtaining everything they wanted without some adversity. Vasily Ivanchuk was quoted actually as saying Magnus Carlsen is a brilliant chess player, but he's no chess genius. And Chucky, I mean, has beaten every world champion there is, and so Magnus is no exception. And in the round 6 event today, against Ding Liren, who is supposed to be Magnus's biggest adversary in this type of format. They played, and they actually played 4 hours early. It wouldn't be Magnus if there wasn't a storyline, so what I'll leave you off with is this. Magnus Carlsen played the first few rounds of this event on a boat. Have you not known that? He was on vacation and was playing on a yacht, apparently. And this match against Ding Liren started 4 hours early because Magnus is leading on the global level in fantasy football. And today he was needed for media obligations, so he was not going to be able to make his round. Again, very Magnesian. And we have a position from the opening. This was the only game where he defeated Ding Liren in their match. It's a semi-Slav setup with dc4, bit of a gambit variation. Let me tell you this. This position has been reached 3,924 times according to my database. And the move that Magnus played here, knight d2, has been played in about 0.6 of 1%. Less than half, almost half of 1% of all games ever played. Knight d2, the idea being that you don't push your pawns in the center, you open up a target on c4, you play a4, and immediately Ding Liren went wrong. He started to consolidate his structure, and that's when Magnus utilized this reroute to push the pawn forward, move to e4, c5, and chop things down in the center of the board with the following swish and flick of the wrist. Takes, and bishop h5. What a move. Again, Magnus likes spatial dominance, and bishop h5 prevents the king from ever castling successfully. Magnus is constantly threatening with a move like e6, and here Ding Liren is in dire straits. He had to play bishop e7 and get castled, and he was not able to find the critical approach. Magnus, stockpiling the pressure, and queen d1. Does not offer a trade of the queens, retreats with his queen, guards the bishop, and breaks through at the right moment with e6, and in a few moves, Ding resigned. An opening surprise from Magnus that leads to a beautiful final position where despite being 5 points down, that is a full rook. I mean, it's not quite a full rook, but look at this king. And this is the only game that he was able to win against Ding Liren in the match, but it was convincing enough. And with that, Magnus moves to 17 out of 18 points in this event. His first 6 opponents, with the exception of Vasily Ivanchuk, he's made it look easy against all of them. I will pull up the standings before we go. After 6 days of the Chess 24 Legends of Chess, we've got Magnus and Jan at the very top. If you haven't seen my video on Jan's games, go check it out. It'll appear somewhere on the left side. Well, and I will definitely love to hear your comments about the thumbnail and other thumbnail ideas in the future. Hope you enjoyed this video. Take care, and I'll see you in the next recap video.